Wonderful. Welcome. All right, that's great. Anyone else?
Hey everybody, I'm Leon. Actually graduated college pretty recently and started working at Electric Era with SRUG. My experience with Rust is fairly limited. My only real project in Rust was actually a coding challenge when I was applying to a bioinformatics lab in college. Didn't get in, but it was cool to experience Rust for the first time there. And I've heard a lot of cool things about it, so excited to learn a bit more.
Great, thank you.
I wonder if the bioinformatics question was a linked list question in Rust. Famously hard, famously difficult to do in Rust. Famously difficult. For those who are curious about that, you can search up learning Rust by using too many linked lists, and you will be blown away about how interestingly complex a linked list problem can be. Maybe it was scared you away, so. Anyway, we have upcoming meetings. We typically meet the third Thursday of every month, but because of the holidays and sometimes a room booking conflict, that can move around. So these are the dates. We have meetups already scheduled on meetup.com, and for those of you on Discord, the calendar on Discord, they're all up to date through February, March, April, maybe of the next year. So we've got we're booked quite far ahead. As always, I'd like to take a moment to thank the volunteers. What we try to do is create a space for everyone without making it too hard for anyone, so we don't burn out. So we try to make sure that people who volunteer spend typically less than an hour a month being able to help put this together. So that's really important. So let me take a moment though to ask Ben if he'd like to put a call out for speakers. I didn't tell him I was going to do this. Do you want to put a call out for speakers?
Yes, this is an official call out.
Surprise!
Yeah, I mean, if anybody wants to talk, let me know. There's always plenty of slots, I feel like, and we're pretty, we're not picky about the talks, so if you have something cool to talk about in Rust, like we always like beginner talks and stuff too, and it can be a good way to learn something, where you sign up for the talk and you're like, oh, I have to learn this thing. So yeah, just message me on Discord, or just post anywhere on Discord, and I'll find you probably on the channel, or server that is. Yeah, I think that's it.
Yeah. Thanks a lot, Ben. So yeah, it's you don't have to be an expert in your topic. You can bring a topic and say, hey, I'm interested in this. We had a fantastic talk, I think it was last month actually, with people figuring things out. Here's my journey. And generated a lot of conversation. So if you're working on something, thinking about something, go ahead and talk with us, and we'll be happy to help you figure something out. And you can also schedule off into the future, so you don't have to be like, oh, I'm not ready to speak yet. You could book it for March or June next year, whatever you'd like. We usually get going pretty good, and then we want to keep going after we lose the room. So for those of you who would like to join us, there is a Red Robin. It's 148. It's a Red Robin at Overlake. It's not the one at Redmond Town Center. So if you were familiar with the Red Robin at Redmond Town Center, it's not that one. It's closer to here. But we typically will get there afterwards, or go there afterwards, and chat for a little bit and grab a little bit of grub. And everyone is welcome, of course. A couple of announcements, of course. Thank you, Carl, for your media work. I know we're still working on it, but we will be typically we'll be posting the videos on both YouTube and the official Rust video channel, which most people didn't even know that the Rust language had a video channel, but Carl found it, and there's some good stuff on there. So those are the links to the two locations, and I already did the call for speakers with Ben, so I think we're all set there.
And don't be intimidated if you want to give an informal talk.
Because folks online can't hear.
Don't be intimidated. You can decide after you give the talk whether you want it if you want to submit it to the official Rust video talk. So feel free to do whatever you want here and just see how it goes.
Yeah, that's a good point. We won't force you to put it online, of course. Okay. So I think I'm going to jump into the talks next, but first, before I do that, anybody have any job postings, interesting news, Rust related, that they would like to discuss? No?
Hey folks, this is. Can folks hear me?
Yes, we can. Hi, Sid.
Oh, cool. Hey, I'm stuck in traffic on the 5 trying to get there, but I figured I would just introduce myself real quick. I'm Sid from Electric Era, and we do have job postings for Electric Era. Happy to chat with folks that are looking for a position, after all the talks. And it's not necessarily Rust related, but I'm always casually interested in seeing how we can kind of push our code bases in the direction of things that Rust really brings. So definitely feel free to chat to me if you're looking for a gig and you're super interested in things related to EV charging, and some of the stuff that we're trying to solve.
Cool. What's your role at EV Era? Electric Era.
Electric Era. Yep, I'm the VP of software there, so I run the software program for current gen and the next gen product that we're developing. And so it'll be roles related to embedded software engineering if that's your there's some stuff there, as well as solving the interoperability problem in EV charging, which if you drive an EV and you've charged at something that's not a Tesla supercharger, you'll probably know what I'm talking about.
Wonderful. Thanks, Sid.
So, yep, thank you.
Hey, my name is Vishal, and my former team is building a distributed storage system in Rust over at Apple for internal use. So I know that they're still hiring, and if you're interested, I can give you names of hiring managers. The project was within Rust. I started it, 6 or 7 years ago. It's pretty widely used, so if you're interested in joining that effort, let me know and I can get you in touch with the right folks.
Wonderful. Thank you. All right, we are going to have a fully employed room here before we're done. That's great. That's fantastic. Beating the trends. Okay, that's great. So, many people, I'm sure you've heard, Cloudflare had a little incident. Everybody's blaming it on RAP, right? You guys have heard about this? Anybody not heard about this? Yes? Okay. So what happened is you go on the internet, you go to your favorite site, myfavoritesite.com, and it doesn't work. And you're like, what the heck? What's going on? And so it turned out that Cloudflare, who is a very large provider of basically distributed denial of service attacks, CDN, edge networking, had a little problem. They're famously a Rust shell, and so the fact that Cloudflare, took down the internet and they're on Rust was kind of a spicy take. So people could not wait to figure out what had happened, and so there's this line of code that's now famous. It's going to be famous, I'm sure. And it's like a bunch of lines of code, and then at the end of it, it's an unwrap call. And it's like, unwrap, it brought down the internet. Well, they had issued an update, and I guess they hadn't tested it, and the update went out, and something, some condition wasn't met, and the unwrap, basically, if unwrap doesn't see data, it's supposed to panic. And for those less familiar with Rust, panic is, despite the name, is actually an orderly shutdown of your process. It's just going to, we're done. It's not going to do anything friendly and give you errors and let you, recover easily, although there are ways to do that. It's just, the idea is to shut down your process. Something really bad has happened. So they shipped unwrap in production code, and it went down. So the internet is blaming unwrap. I am famously, for those who worked with me, I am famously against shipping and unwrapping in production. So this is going to sound a little weird coming from me, but I don't think unwrap was the cause of the problem here. I think not testing your stuff before you release it is a big problem. If you don't do a, this other company, CloudStrike, didn't they have a little problem? Again, they were shipping an update, and in their case, they told the software, which is written in C++, running in kernel space, that there's an update, and the update has 21 records. And then they sent it the data file to read. And guess how many records the data file had? 20. So C++ got to number 21, index out of bounds, same fault. Pretty much the same thing, right? And then this time you're in kernel space, so down you go. And they did this update to customers without properly testing it. And your system comes back up again, and Cloudflare does the same thing. And Cloudflare would do the same thing. And you're back crashing again. And at that point, 4% of airline flights were canceled, and 911 was not available. Many countries around the world and many states here. It was bad. So I would have thought we'd have learned our lesson, but I guess software's not getting any better. Anyway, any thoughts? No?
Yeah, I'll grab the other mic.
Go ahead.
Specifically? Sorry. I'm probably just not doing it right. Specifically, they had a thing that assumed there would be less than 200 features, and something went wrong, so they duplicated features, so there were more than 200. What was it supposed to do? I mean, if it expects there to be less than 200, and because of an error there were more, there's stopping is probably the best thing they could do under the circumstances.
Yes, they had a problem. They had hard-coded a limit on a table that they said, we never want to see more than 200 records here.
512 kilobytes.
Yeah, it's. I don't even think it was memory related. They just thought, we'll never see this many.
It sounds like Bill Gates back in the 80s.
Oh yeah, 640K is all you'll ever need, right? But what happened was the update actually caused the system to start duplicating records. So it was putting the same information in repeatedly. And so they did actually have less than 200 distinct records, as they would have expected, but the duplication pushed it over the limit. So you would still have a problem, even if you hadn't used unwrap. Even if you had used proper error handling, you would have returned an error. Would that have been recoverable? Oh, I'm just going to go in and delete the duplicate entries in the database that shouldn't have happened in the first place. That's probably not the code that would have been written. So that's one of the reasons why, as much as I hate to see unwrap in production code, this is not a case where I can say, unwrap did it, damn it.
Maybe a tangent, but what's wrong with occasional unwraps in some, like never is a strong statement, right? Isn't there some cases where you actually unwrap?
That's a very good question. For those who didn't hear it, never is a strong statement. Are there any, is there any case where it's actually, justified to use unwrap? Yes, there are. I think they're very rare cases, extremely rare cases. And when I say rare, I mean probably not unwrap, right? At the worst case, you might use an expect, which does the same thing but prints out a message. But realistically, I would use an unwrap or else, and then put inside of it an unreachable macro call. And what you're doing now is you're saying, this is not because I'm being lazy that I'm using unwrap. I'm actually have gone through the reasoning. You're telling future readers of your code that this panic can never happen. And it's documented in your code as such. And you're even telling the compiler to pessimize that particular code path because it should never happen. And in those cases, I think unwrap is okay. But of course, inside your unreachable, you have to explain why you think this can never happen. So in your code review, other people can read this and say, yep, that's right, we're safe here. So pretty rare cases, but yeah, I'm pretty hardcore against shipping unwrap. In your unit tests and all of that, totally fine, go for it. But shipping in production code, you have to ask yourself if you want to panic.
Yeah, okay. So what you're describing is kind of just documentation, but you're still panicking. Sometimes it just isn't the worst thing that you can do.
I'm sorry, can you
I
speak to the
guess-
mic, because the folks here can't hear you.
You're kind of just saying just document it, but it's like, kind of the same. You're still panicking, kind of.
Well, in the case of unwrap or else, and then you use unreachable, you're saying this code path can't happen, right? And so, and you're justifying it. So that's a case where you've already done the test in the previous line for something, and you've done a check for something in the previous line. And so if somebody then later in the future changes your code, updates it, modifies it, they've broken an invariant, it's showing them very quickly, very clearly what they've changed that's broken. And we've lost rocket ships, and there's been enough accidents here where I think it's just better to just not do it. Not do it from an unwrap where you can't tell if the person's been lazy, but if you're going to do it, document it. Make sure that it's clear and show the reader that this actually can't happen. And if it can happen, decide how you want to handle that, probably through an error. But I'm imagining there's a case where you actually do want to panic. So in those cases, that would be justified. But this gets pretty rare, in my experience. But yeah, in this case, I don't think we can blame unwrap. Damn it.
Yeah, just some thoughts. So one of the things that count for the 200 limit, the hardcode they set, is because those 200 other features they test whether it's actually a bot or someone is actually a user, legit user, and they don't want to lose time. So more than 200 they put. Even if it's 1 nanosecond, let's say, like that's as a web this thing, they really want to speed up this number or whatever. So that was the reason that they put that hard limit. And also, I would say one of the things is like that's what AI coding would do. Like AI coding is, so that's the push that they're doing so much. So unless we know what's happening, maybe it will just try it out. But we have to be very careful of like the AI coding. And maybe it was AI did the code, I don't know. But this can happen even into AI code when AI does the code. So yeah.
All right, thank you for that. I have not heard any suspicion, right, that this was AI code is the problem. And I will ask Alex, who's our coordinator for this room, for a larger room next month, just FYI. We have some folks sitting on the floor and sitting on tables and stuff, so here you go. All right, so we're going to have a couple talks tonight. Let's see, so the first talk we have by Isaac. What porting a Python game to Rust taught me about managing state, mutability, and WASM. Beginner talk, 45 minutes. And our second talk will be interview questions in Rust at beginner and intermediate level. So it should be very, very good. And I'm loving seeing beginner talks here, so I don't want everything to fly over too many people's heads all the time. All right. Isaac. You should be able to. I'm the only one who seems to not be able to.
This feels like in front of
Yeah.
Is it ideal if I plug in, or should I just share to the teams?
You can try. I just plugged it in and it just started showing. So.
Oh, okay. All right. I like sharing. By the way, that talk title is outdated. Okay. Yeah, okay.
Show me this.
Hi everyone. I'm a beginner Rust user. Is it?
No.
And I'm also a beginner microphone user. I'm Isaac White, and this is a beginner talk. And this is my first time presenting to developers or people who are programmers. As you'll learn in my introduction slide, I am a little out of my element here, but this is fun, and I'm eager to share with you what I learned in the process of Carsonizing my friend's Tetris / Mega Man mashup game. So I'm Isaac Wyatt, and I have been a hobbyist programmer pretty much all my life. I started out on a VIC-20, which is like a knockoff Commodore 64. My mom brought it home from a garage sale, and as a kid, I loaded programs off of cassette tape into the VIC-20, and I typed in basic programs from magazines and stuff. I didn't really know what I was doing at that age, but it was a while ago. You can see the hardcover Wikipedia on the bookshelf there, and the monitor is actually a old school CRT television. So this was a little while ago, and I had a lot more hair. So I've spent some time in QBasic, where my buddy and I made games. And when I started my career work, I did a lot of data analysis. So I picked up SQL, a little bit of R, just a bit of Python and Colab, and then made a couple of desktop apps in C# just to solve some very, very simple problems that had to do with merging CSV files. And then a couple summers ago, I started picking up Rust because I wanted to learn my quote-unquote real programming language. That wasn't an interpreted thing that could compile to a lot of different targets. That was also very, very performant. And I made my first OSS contribution, my first open source contribution that fall to Task Warrior, which is a command line task management tool. And then just a couple months ago, I deployed my first Rust code to production, which is just a back-end serverless function to collect web forms and send it off to a CRM or like a Salesforce.com kind of thing. So that's been my experience across a number of startups. I did serve a little bit of time at Google and have a lot of experience with technology and automation because I serve marketing and sales teams with tools like that. But I've never been paid to be a programmer. So this was a fun project that I did, not only to learn Rust a little bit better, but also because I like to pull pranks on my buddy. And the story is Mark Pulver is my best friend. And he and I mentioned earlier, we played a lot of video games together, and we make video games together back when QBasic was the thing we were using. And for his birthday, sometimes I do surprises. One year, I had this cake made for him, which is a puzzle from a video game we played together called Seventh Guest, way back in the 90s. And I was thinking, last year, what am I going to do for his next birthday? And I noticed he let his personal domain expire, markpulver.com. And so I sniped it. And I'm like, what am I going to do with this? Should I put something embarrassing on it? And I decided, no, that might not be good. So I decided to make a tasteful portfolio of some of the things he's created over the years, which happens to be a Tetris implementation that he wrote in Python in 2004. But the thing about it is, that Tetris implementation doesn't run anymore. He wrote it in 2004 under Python 2.3, and it was targeting Windows XP, and I couldn't get it to run on my computer without updating a bunch of code in it. And at first, I was talking with Carl over here about how can I get this to run on a website, and he suggested PyScript, and then I was having so many issues. Some of the libraries don't exist anymore. Numeric was replaced by NumPy and so on. And then I'm like, duh, I'm a Rustation. I should do what all of us in Rust are doing. You just port things to Rust and you're done with it, right? So that's what I started doing, and that's how I learned a lot more Rust and learned some things that I'm going to share with you this evening. We'll talk about a little bit about the game engine and game world struct and the idea of entities. And the beginner lessons I want to share have to do with enums, traits, and how I made a single file distributable that includes all the media and stuff. There's a couple other learnings we might have time for. I'm getting a little bit of a later start, and I want to keep us on time. So and there might be a short demo at the end. If you're watching this video up here, you might have seen a little bat flying around. Did anyone see that? Yeah? Okay, there's a little bat flying around the screen. We're going to talk about that guy. That's one of the That's one of the main entities in the game. But here's a profile of the Python that I ported over to Rust. It was written in Python 2.3, just about 4,300 lines of code, 6 dependencies. It ran at a static 48 frames per second, and it used to run in Windows, and it doesn't run today without massaging it. On the other hand, my Rust code is not quite as efficient in terms of lines of code. I mentioned I was a beginner, right? It's about 11,000 lines of code, but I also modularize a lot of it. My buddy wrote a very monolithic single file. Lots of nested if statements using Pygame. But it's also only 23 mine is also only 23 megabytes, but it runs at whatever the refresh rate of your monitor is. Mine happens to be 60 frames per second, but this should also run at 120. Probably would run higher than that, I don't know yet. And this also runs on a variety of platforms, including web browsers. So here's a quick overview of the game engine. I'm using just 5 dependencies, and 2 of them have to do with logging. The dependency I'm using for the game engine is called MacroQuad. I do have a little bit of experience with Bevy. Bevy's great. I wanted to try something a little bit different for this project, and I tried out MacroQuad, and it worked great for this project. Some of its sister dependencies are QuadNet, which allows for networking, and Quad Storage, which is just for storage either in the browser or on your local machine. I use Target Triple to get the target triple of the binary that's deployed so that I can send it along with logging information to Grafana, so I can analyze logs in the specific binary. And I use the zip crate for runtime decompression of assets that are embedded in the binary. So here's the main game loop. This is those of you who have done any game development, this is probably very familiar. Our game world is a struct that has a variable called game state, and that value is stored and potentially updated and evaluated every cycle of this loop, or every frame, and this runs at, in my case, 60 frames per second. The process for each game loop is we update all the entities that are in there. An entity could be a Tetris piece that you want to rotate back and forth. It could be that little pause bat that some of you saw flying around the screen. It could be one of the Mega Man robots that are on the screen. But the game world stores all those entities and updates their data values and changes their behavior every cycle. Then we collect the player inputs, and then we evaluate the current game state and process that game state. So this is very typical in game development. At the beginning, when you launch the game, it initializes, then it moves typically to the title screen, and then gameplay. And then you'll be in gameplay, game state for a while, moving Tetris pieces, completing lines, and then hopefully you do a good job and you get to see the credits of the game and who helped make it. And sometimes you might move back to the title screen, and we have a very efficient game loop here. Finally, at each function of the game loop potentially updates the game state, and then we draw everything that needs to be drawn, and the game loop starts all over again. This is relatively quick, pretty concise, and it makes for a very, very fast implementation. This largely matches what my friend implemented in Python, but the data structure is very, very, very different. So this struct called the game world is the only thing that persists each loop of gameplay. If I create an entity that isn't inserted into that vector of entities right there, it will not persist beyond the current game loop. I also created this entity trait so that we can store a variety of different kinds of structs in that entity variable in a very, very efficient kind of way. And then each game loop just calls the update and the draw function. We'll talk about that a little bit later. So here's an example of something that is implemented in Python and something I ported to Rust. In Python, that pause bat that you may have seen flying around the screen earlier is a class called pause. It has an initialization method, an animate method, and a move method, and so on. In my Rust implementation, I call it pause_bat, and I use an enum to define its current behavior, whether it's idle and sort of hidden from the screen, or whether it's moving around the screen and what the direction it's flying in. We implement the same methods, new instead of initialization, and move direction. And then at the very bottom, I'm not showing it here right at the moment, but we implement the entity functions for pause_bat as well, so that we can insert it into the vector of game world entities. Oh, there it is. I forgot about that part. Okay, so that's a quick overview of the game world and the entities. Here's the first beginner lesson that I had. So my experience being more of a hobbyist programmer than a professional programmer is I hadn't really used enums before. When I was working at Google, I did a lot of database queries where I'd specify a value for an enum and it just looked like a string to me. That's kind of it. But as a programmer, I'd never worked with enums and I didn't really understand sort of the nature of them. But it turns out that when I was programming this and I wanted to manage the current behavior of the pause_bat, just specifying strings, could lead to some potential issues. These are known as magic integers or magic strings. And the wrong way to do it would be to say this should be a string, and if the action equals idle or move, then do a thing. But it's very easy to mess up the string, misspell it, or have a set of values that are incomplete or not mutually exclusive. And so as I was working through this and wanted to figure out more idiomatic ways to write code, I implemented this enum called pause_bat action. And now I had a mutually exclusive set of values that were also collectively exhaustive. And these can be switched, and I don't run the risk of specifying the wrong type of behavior for a bat or an undefined behavior for the bat. And then something that was very unique to me once I learned enums was that they can store data. And this is actually the whole time I've been writing things that are stored in an option. Turns out is an enum that stores data. But it was not obvious to me until I really realized this. So those of you who didn't see the pause_bat the first time around, this is what he's doing. He paused the game, he's flying around, bouncing off the walls and stuff. The data that you can store in the enum is any type of primitive, like an int or a string, but it can also be a struct. And that's, you can define that when you define your struct. It's very, very easy to do. And then when you want to specify the data that gets loaded in there, it's very, very ergonomic. And you see that we have pause_bat action, move, go to this direction. And the way the direction is specified, I don't know if I should have included this code. There might be an unwrap in there. I hope I don't crash anything. A little bit of vulnerability here. But the direction is basically just 2 ins. And it's the delta of where it currently was. So we're just specifying a directional vector. But it's very easy to specify. It's ergonomic and it's concise. And it doesn't live on the struct. So if you already have a long struct definition, you can move some of that data to the enum, and it's ergonomic. But what's really cool about this is when you need to do something else with it, you can put it in your match statement, you can pull it out and process it, right? So both reading and writing the data that's in the enum variant is very ergonomic. And I like this so much better than magic strings or overloading the struct with lots and lots of data that you may only use once in a while. And that's sort of the last point on this lesson, is that This is not implemented in the game, but hypothetically, if my pause back could also teleport and I needed to specify where it was going to teleport to as a 16-bit integer, or a pair of 16-bit integers, x, y, it would be really inefficient to store both the teleport target and a move direction on the struct. That'd basically be 64 bits that are used for mutually exclusive actions the pause back could take. So instead, I could potentially store them both in enum variants, and instead of taking up 64 bits on the struct, the enum would just use 32 bits instead. Because those will never both be used at the same time, and the enum only allocates enough memory for the biggest thing you need to store, we cut our storage requirement for this behavior in half. And this is an arbitrary sort of constructed example. This is not a real example from the code. But once I realized this, I started looking back at all the places in the process of making this that I should have been using enums and storing data in enum variants instead of on the struct for that entity instead. All right, so beginner lesson number 2. The game world and the entity traits. So traits were something I definitely did not have a strong understanding of when I started learning Rust. I didn't have something that was analogous to traits in my experience. Maybe there's programming languages that have a concept of traits, but in doing data analysis and writing very basic desktop apps for solving small problems, I just never really ran across anything that reminded me of traits. And so this required a little bit more time to wrap my head around. But it turned out it was very crucial for the purpose of making a game world object that I could store all the different types of structs that represent things in the game in a single vector. I'm not going to talk about box and diang, or dynamic dispatch, in the scope of this talk, other than to say they're required when I want to implement a vector of a trait called entity. But this trait entity is basically defines a set of methods that I need every struct that I want to carry over from one game frame to the next and store in a vector called entities. Every one of those structs has to implement these 5 functions that are on the right-hand side of the screen. All those functions don't have to do something, but they all have to be implemented for the struct. And then when the game world goes through its loop and it says update, then we just say for every entity in the vector of entities, call the update function that's on the struct. Easy as pie. Same thing for draw. And that made managing the data for our various structs very, very easy, because I just had one place to go for my entities right there on the game world. So for our pause bat, this is what implementing each of those functions looks like. So that pause bat implements the trait entity. An update method, which evaluates the data that's on the pause bat and updates its behavior if necessary. A draw function, which gets the textures it needs for the current frame of animation. And then a couple other helper functions, which have to do with downcasting the vector of entities down into a concrete type, which is, we can talk about it a little bit later if we have time to get there. And similarly, as an example, a Tetris piece that is in the play field that you want to manipulate, move it around and rotate it, this also implements the entity trait. And similarly, we have an update method that gets called every game frame, a draw method that draws each part of the Tetris piece. And this gets stored in the vector of entities. Ideally, there's only one active Tetris piece at a time. If there were ever more than one active Tetris piece for you to manipulate, that would be a very challenging Tetris game. So the vector of entities should only have one of these at a moment, at a time. but it could have a pause bat, it could have a Tetris piece, it could have any number of different kinds of structs within it. And so that makes retrieving those very, very interesting, but it makes inserting them into that vector very, very easy. And of course, on each game loop, processing them very, very easy. So on the game world object, we implement the update function. Again, we just call for each entity in this list of entities or this vector of entities, update it. And when it's time to draw it, we draw it. But getting those back out is a little bit more challenging. I have a slide at the end that shows how I did that. Okay, lesson 3 is the final beginner lesson I'm going to share with you. This is how I figured out how to embed all of the media assets associated with the graphics and the sound and the music and the font, all within a single binary of the game. Turns out there's this great macro called include bytes, and you can include a zip file using include bytes, and you can decompress it at runtime using the zip crate. So what we have on the left is we import the zip crate and specify a binary of assets.zip. And then on the game world texture cache, we call a function called load_zip, and this load_zip will pull in that static variable on zipped assets, and it will, and oh, there's an unwrap in there. I just saw it. And it will go through each file of the archive. If it's a JPEG or a PNG, it'll decompress it and then insert it into the texture cache. And now, anytime that I need to load a struct that has, like the pause bat animations, I can just grab it from the texture cache. And for loading the game in the browser, I can ship just a single binary, and it will unpack itself and load the assets in the memory. And now it's just a single 23 megabyte WASM instead of making a web request for each and every asset it might need to load. When I originally started building this and testing it, I found out that I was making thousands of web requests for each playthrough because it turns out that my buddy who made the game has one image file for each frame of an animation for every struct or every entity that's in the game. And so over the course of a playthrough, it was like thousands of web requests, and that just didn't seem like the right way to build this. And this turned out to be a very, very easy way. You pay for it with a little bit of runtime performance when you load the WASM in the browser. But after that, everything is just very, very, very snappy. And of course, distributing binary for your Linux machine or your Windows machine is just a single binary. You don't have to download folders full of uncompressed stuff. And without that compression, the total file size would be much, much larger. Okay, so I talked about enums, what they are, how they can store both state as opposed to magic strings, and they can store data for convenience and memory performance. I talked about how traits work in context of the game, and they make a very easy way to store a common set of a set of structs in a common place, even though they use different amounts of memory. And I talked about how I embedded a zip file in the binary to make a single file distributable and make more efficient web requests. But to bring the story back, did I accomplish anything for my buddy? Well, I got all of our mutual friends and people who contributed to the project on a video call, and I convinced my friend's wife to have him join the call under the guise of me showing him something cool I did in the spreadsheet. When he got on the call, all of his friends, of course, were there, and And he said, wow, what is this? And I'm like, that's your birthday. He's like, great. And I said, why don't you check out your website? He's like, I don't have a website anymore. I'm like, yes, you do. He played the game. There's a secret stage in the game. And he played through it and saw the secret stage. One of our friends is a music composer. He made new music for it. I found a pixel artist who made a new robot boss, Mega Man robot boss. He got to the secret stage, and he just loved it. And he said, Mega Man 2 Puzzle Attack Carcinized is awesome. It's essentially a love letter to a love letter that I made of Mega Man 2. I'm a little suspicious of this because he used an M dash. But I did see in the logs, he did play through it several times, and he got the new high score for the game of 12 minutes and 45 seconds, which is the amount of time, the lowest time that anybody on the scoreboard got. So I'm pretty sure he enjoyed that, and that was a fun project to do for him. I don't know what I'm going to do for his next birthday. I'm kind of in trouble. If you have ideas, please let me know. But if you want to play it, you can go to markpulver.com. I don't know what the web connection here is like. You can scroll down to where it says playable in your browser, click that, and once you get to that page, click the black box. The WASM doesn't load if you don't click the black box. Browsers don't like if you try to load WASM without interacting with the canvas element. But other than that is my beginner talk. Any questions or comments or anything? There's one in the back.
The website does appear to be down.
MarkPulver.com appears to be down. I will get a hold of Cloudflare immediately.
They don't ever get up to it.
I've got it. It's just the game isn't loading.
Yeah.
Don't forget to click the black box, exactly.
I am.
Click it harder.
Well, we are on government Wi-Fi here, for what that's worth.
Other questions for Isaac?
Does the game engine support running on desktop as well, or just in browser?
It does. And if you wanted a demo for me, I could. I'm sorry. The question is, does it run on locally as well as in the browser? The answer is yes, it does. So I've compiled it on my local Linux machine. I've also cross-compiled to Windows. I have yet to cross-compile to a Mac OS yet. It requires a developer key or something. I haven't figured that out yet. I do intend to post the targeted binaries eventually. I'm calling this version 0 8.9. When I get to 1.0, I think I'll have those binaries available for download.
This might be performance nitpicking, but I'm very curious. You said that assets were JPEGs and PNGs. Is the zip archive compressed, and does that actually save much space?
It saves a ton of space. So uncompressed, I believe that all the assets included is around 120 megabytes. But it also has music and sound effects. And then the compression bit, if I can go back to the beginning of my presentation, the compression bit dependency was a little interesting because when I wanted to compile with WASM as a target, I couldn't use certain compression algorithms because they require C bindings, and so I had to specify, specifically I had to specify a feature called deflate, which uses a Rust native compression algorithm. Now, if I were only targeting, for example, Linux or Windows or something, these other methods would probably have worked. But because of my requirements, I wanted to use something else.
So the design of your game engine, I'm wondering, did you study game engine design, or did you just emulate the Python version?
A little bit of both. Mostly I ported the overall logic of Mark's game engine into Rust. But this is also, my understanding is this is also a common flow for game engines, where there's a while loop that just evaluates the game state and then executes a function based on the current game state. But I'm not a professional game developer, and some of the games I've developed in the past definitely do not use this model.
After what I just saw, you can't say that anymore. That's excellent. Any other questions? All right. Thank you, Isaac.
Thank you very much.
It works on Chromium, by the way.
Were you on Safari?
I was on Firefox.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you for that feedback. I will have our QA department.
Okay, so thank you for that, Isaac. All right, so let's take a 10-minute break or so, and we can regroup after that at about 7:10.
That's enough time for you to get a high score in the game.
All the characters?
Yes.
I got one.
The instructions that are on it. Yes.
Oh, yeah?
Two of us were just at a Python conference a week ago, telling everyone that Python conference is not Rust.
Was this the conference in Seattle?
PyData. PyData Seattle, but it was
Yeah, I feel like that's actually why I'm struggling quite a bit, because I spent a lot of time trying to Python code that was needing to be very processing, which is like just awful and like headache, and I was just like, well, this is dumb, like just like optimizing this to be like 100 times better. It's probably easier to just make like a tiny layer. So I was like, it's a Python code based thing, so it needed like a tiny layer to communicate between Python and Rust. Not that much interoperability was needed, so in the end I was just like,
I was called C++. Multi-threaded C++ 7 or 8 years ago. So hard to maintain.
I see.
It was mostly Python, just wanted to start.
Yes, I haven't seen I guess I had to be
and I did not have, we didn't have any.
There's a special variant, everybody uses for the multi-thread. I think that they've got but it's
Music,
Rust. Use Rayon, they can use the matrix. It's very easy to make fast.
and then you just slowly extend the amount of Rust.
It's still most, this project is mostly Python. It's called like,
Oh, it's Python. So that's what you said you were putting Rust in a C++.
no. The Python was calling C++. I took out the C++ and put in Rust to be fast. It wasn't any faster, but it was more correct. It's not about it. I found a data race suck.
Yes. It's also student friends. So
Yeah, I think a little bit of coding.
a teacher turns up to take up
Python to Rust
some courses schedule, and then he somehow knows
Yeah,
about it.
definitely. There was something that just it was funny because we kind of do like a one-to-one code, even though the language patterns are a little different, but you know, it's fine. It was
Mostly like mix of like multiple.
Yeah, there was some nice bugs around
Jazz or like
some of
rock
it was
from
like you said, a database, so there were like the integer types and we found bugs around.
There were like different things.
There was one that was
The only problem was when I was there,
noticed it.
when I was
Future what? Oh, yeah.
So like I've only heard like some time from like really know this style, and then it was like that was fun. That was kind of like that's how I remember I got from systems distributed. When people take care of my projects, so like I have to find these like little wins.
I did that three course itself, it was like mostly kind of a fun. Can we talk about how to make slow running programs? But then at the end I said, but if you want to make a Turing machine.
What do you mean?
I did even worse in the
like terrible things to do?
no, try to compilers just compilers for very simple abstract Turing machine. Done that. So I made a show Turing machine emulation. You didn't take the course? Well, what if you really don't consider Rust? And it literally was and then it's Spring 23, actually writing in assembly code. Rust doesn't make it. It's easy to write assembly code on the board. So for Turing machines, assembly can be faster. So that means it's 7 times faster. So now it's 700 times faster. But I said, well, you should just stick with the Rust. The rest was much easier to do. And for what was important, the Rust was fast enough. So there's another process that took longer than faster. So that time I actually I was in one call with him, and then he was like, then optimize the assembly is only 7 times faster.
And then like, what the hell? No, the call. Okay, the Zoom call. Actually, the Zoom call. Yeah. So he was like, he was sitting like this. There was one call that I on the bench never figured out how to figure out that would have been more. Trying to make the rest of the
it was like an office hour.
Just because like you
People office hours are actually not also like
you're never FFI. I think I have seen some we didn't actually experiment there's probably a way around it.
My project this is the more important the genomics project. It's all the memory and how do you like it? Uses the IO3 library. In terms of weather, yes. The cost, I love Pittsburgh for sure. I was paying like $500 for like sharing to PHP room. It was a pretty chunky operation in Rust in the array. Then it passes it back to Python.
That's a good use case.
That works fine.
It's very, and I'm just like sharing just dead and fresh of you.
Yeah. Like here's a benefit to a chunk of memory.
It's like I'm paying here like 2K. Like everyone's like, what I was in an apartment with my mom, we were paying $850. Yeah, exactly. But then it's like costing a lot of data. It's a substantial lot of jumping out. That's kind of a shame. Yeah, like very
the other part
there should have been a way to
I live with, but still in Python is everywhere, but the Rust I need to speak okay, it's going to be Linux and
What is this? Is it like
It's biology.
Is it like a desktop app?
It's they scripted it.
I don't know too much about the data sets. Stuff like
They could do a Python notebook, but it doesn't have a little bit of Python.
My office is in like
It reads in there data, business analysis. That's what I do. That's what I do. But they're running it on Mac, and they're running it on Mac, and they want to run my thing, and they ask this.
I usually take a bus. It's convenient for me. It just like right, it stops outside.
And they might be able to compile it for Windows.
So you guys use Rust?
But then Mac changed the chip. It used to be 64.
And that is where Rust comes into picture.
And now people are using Windows on ARM, so pretty soon
and it's not like the kind of thing you can just shove it in all that.
Basically, once a year I just have to spend a week updating to the next version of Python. Turns out about once a year. And then make sure that everything that's commonly used, the 5 things here in the 6, that I
target like
show me it's stable after. But if it was pure Python, I'd never have to pre-compile it.
it has, I'm pretty sure it has some great structures. Somebody can talk to someone there, and they keep giving talks to us, especially
Most of biology.
probably we just talk about like
biology by
Yeah, anywhere in the world. And it's not even the most important tool to use. A tool that is, I can't even tell them.
Yeah, it's not like you don't want them to like, you don't want to have something. I guess
they have something with it. I'm pretty sure they might have modified for themselves. I'm pretty sure they did with it.
We're biologists. We're lucky to have them. So happy they're using Python. We're lucky to have them using Python. We can't ask them to do anything.
That sounds like
It's okay as long as required.
Yeah, so we are like building some file systems. So I'm working on a
In theory, someone else can.
file system today.
Yeah. Of course, since all my customers are biologists,
So we're working on it.
because they don't know how to get.
So we have like what we do is support for weekend basis. We support for like a lot of things.
it's like a library.
One
A bunch of reusable
The
functions.
main way it's used is one
and then like so currently I'm working on
called a genome-wide association
I'm
study.
working on two things. One of them is actually
Data could be in a bunch of different formats.
and then one is in
projects.
Each of them have
That's how all the like numpy
the only annoying part is different.
Yeah, the NumPy is mostly C++ versus Fortran, but it's all precompiled.
Building itself takes a lot of time.
It does work. It does work. Just an extra layer.
So if I put it in pipeline, I'm pretty sure. So if I put it at
Set
night,
everything up.
like tomorrow morning,
That's cool. Is that like a project you started?
yeah.
No,
I mean, it's okay. Like so what I do is like I just put it up ready, and then I work on something.
Every open source.
That's why
Is Microsoft racing?
we don't have like very hard stuff like that.
Yes, the General Research Division of Microsoft. They have mostly computer science focus because we're doing interesting statistical machine learning, computational biology. It was a project. And we open source it. And then I moved out of research into finance. My first first retirement project was to port it from 2 to 3 for people who could use it. And now, 5 years on, they are not working on it anymore. Everybody's moved to their specific project.
Is it still under Microsoft Selection?
We made our own project. So it's on GitHub as our own project. And I don't think any of the owners are still like, I'm one of the owners and 23 of the other developers.
Let's get started. We have our next presentation here is interview questions in Rust at a beginner intermediate level by Mysterious Pants. Oh my goodness. I'm checking those, but they look kind of like jeans to me, but that's okay. That's all right. If you don't have HTML, I can do that. Oh, yes, okay, well, you can either do that, or you can try screen share. We'll try share. Sometimes Firefox doesn't play that.
I have an HDMI to USB 3 adapter if you need it. Oh, take apart the frameworks. That would be more awesome.
That's yeah, I think you want to borrow that. Okay, we'll make sure Mysterious Pants doesn't run off of this. Let me let Mysterious Pants know. Cool. Awesome.
The screen quality here is so contouring, isn't it?
I think it's the frameworks. I think the frameworks are putting out high res. I think these laptops.
You like the other one as well?
Yeah, it's the same company.
These laptops.
What resolution are you running your screen?
We're gonna go way. Do you know if there's like water here or something?
Yeah, sneak out to the store and then that way by the restrooms.
Yay!
Yeah, that's much better. Great. So, we said red. Okay. I'm also new to microphones. Yeah, I'm Chris. So somebody else bailed, so I've jumped in. So what I've been doing is I've been practicing, leak code style stuff for interviews in ROT. I am not an expert at this, so if you know better than me, please don't take it personally. But the thing I thought would be really fun to talk about with these is that they're really small, self-contained. We can do 1 or 2 of them tonight. We can talk about it. We can write some Rust together and have some fun. If you are looking for jobs, this is an exceptionally difficult market. They're getting very picky. Ask me about some of the interviews I've failed recently. And so, you need to be kind of on top of your game. I've found some resources. The one on my screen right now, Neat Code, is one that I found that looks like it has probably the best pedagogy, where, I need to learn about arrays and hashing. Here's a bunch of things you do.
neat, I understand that. Now I'm going to go learn whatever two pointers is. And you can work down and they kind of build on each other. So you can work through, these to kind of build up your skills. And the theory is by the time you get to the bottom of this list, you should know most of the major concepts that are used in all of the really silly brain teaser, leak code style interview questions. So you shouldn't really be caught on your back foot, like I have been. So that's this site. I thought it was really useful. But I've taken a few of these that I've previously solved and dropped them in here as kind of we can code it together. So we can do this a little interactively. So like I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different things we could work on. I've opened it up to parenthesis balancing by default as a start, as kind of a suggestion that this might be a good one. But I've also hampered myself because I forgot to print out my solution to it. It was a little easier. So I guess we can start this.
You could adjust the contrast / font size as well.
Ooh, yeah. Well, we're on the what do you call it? The comment right now. The main code I think is a little easier. Still hard? Okay. Believe it or not, this is an editor that's written in Rust, so we should be able to find something we like, right? Ooh, that might be a little violent.
Can you zoom in one?
Better. Better. I don't really care about any of these. So, probably the least expensive.
The magnification.
Can you make it a bit bigger?
Yes, we can make it bigger.
There.
Bigger. So, like, if you've never been the victim of a leak code style interview, I've been on both sides of this table recently. Really, what they're looking for are how you think. So it's a lot about your communication when you're doing this. But the first thing they'll do is they'll dump a problem on you. So this is a parenthesis balancing question. So they'll literally when I give question interviews, I ask them what programming language do you want to use, so I can pick the right comment style. So it doesn't mess up the syntax highlighting in the little shared web editor. But otherwise, it's like, okay, there you go. So when I decided to start practicing these, I was like, man, I got to go brush up on all this stuff because I've worked where I have for 9 years. So it's been 9 years since I completed an interview and accepted the offer. So I'm a little out of practice. So I was like, I got to go do this. So I'm like, well, I want to go do it in Rust, but it's not really an appropriate language for interviewing. So in my head, whenever I do this in real time, I translate it back to Python, which is kind of sad, but that's the life I live. So this question is one that I would actually ask. I thought it was really fun. And I've later referenced it on the internet, so it's not secret that I'm leaking some poor interviewer's carefully crafted question, they stole it from somewhere else, I'm stealing it from them. It's cool, we're okay. So this is a really fun one. So given a string that has a bunch of text in it and a bunch of parentheses, can you balance the parentheses by removing parenthesis only? So in this code example, we have an open, and a close, and a close. So what do we got to do to make this correct? Well, we have to delete that last closure. So that seems like it's pretty straightforward. So we can write some code to go do this. Oh, and you should leave the letters alone. Those should all still be in there. So the way I set this up in my little project, I have another project where I have the solution, is I start by writing a test. It's really good behavior in interviews. You probably don't need to get so crazy as to start writing out PyTest or something, but have something which shows you're thinking about the cases that you want to pass first. So I've written out some of the tests here, and so we can start here. I really wish this was a loud mic, because then I could use my hands. Do they have one? Awesome. And so then we also have our balance function, and if I save this and run it, I should get a whole bunch of failures where it says, hey, this failed because I haven't implemented the program. So this is kind of where I start any of these problems. If you're doing it off of something like leetcode.com, they have a really annoying way of writing their initial tests. Okay, thank you. They have a really annoying way of writing their tests where they expect you to put in they expect you to implement a trait, which isn't itself annoying, but they have a lot of weird ways that they write their function signatures. Like they pass in owned strings instead of an @stir, which is a little goofy. Any question you find in LeetCode which involves anything involving a linked list is usually a no-go for reasons we've talked about before. Because when you start thinking about the ownership and borrowing, and then it's like, oh, I have to promote everything to a reference counted, but then if it's a doubly linked list, then I need a weak reference going backwards, and it gets really hairy really fast. And if you're thinking, I'm trying to practice for an interview, you do not have time to talk about type and ownership theory in a 15-minute interview session, so do not try. But for most other problems, Rust is actually quite delightful for this. So like when we're doing this problem, the way I'd approach it is, well, first I know I'm going to have to iterate through the string. So, I'm going to have this for, let's see, it's going to be the index and the character in cars.enumerate. There we go. So this is something I learned the hard way the initial time, which is that if you get the length and then you try and iterate over the length of it and then try and index into a string, in Rust that's very hard because Rust strings are UTF-8, right? And so UTF-8 has the idea of a multi-byte grapheme. So you can't know if a character is 8 bits long or 16 bits long, or I saw one that was really scary. It was like 512 bits long. Salvo text, go look at that. That's pretty scary. So if you try and do it where you index over that and then you go, well, s.cars.nth, and that goes very slowly, surprisingly slowly. Whereas this, it's actually really, really good. So, it's like, okay, I have, so I'm iterating. And so if I think about how I approached this problem when I was just talking about it, I was talking about, I have an open parenthesis, a closed parenthesis, and an unmatched one. So immediately I'm thinking, I have open parenthesis. Is going to be, I probably want to keep that as something that I'm going to grow because I don't immediately know what size it should be, so probably a vet. Then I have a closed parenthesis. I can code, I can't spell. So, we're doing that. So then I'm going to match on that character. And, this is where Rust is kind of a cheat code in these problems, because it's like, what if it's an open parenthesis? Well, I'm just going to put my open parenthesis and push that character, the index of that character, and that'll become clear later. But that's a problem, because that needs to be mutable. And if you are newer to Rust and you're really confused what I'm doing, please stop me. Mute and match, excellent. What's the question? The question is, you lost me on mute and match. Yeah, that's a really good question. So, in Rust, by default, everything is immutable. I can't change it. But I can change it by adding the mute keyword. Or mut, or mutable. There's a lot of division on how you pronounce that. Pick one that seems fun to you. So by declaring that mutable, I can now use that push function, which, if you look at its signature, says, hey, I need a mutable reference to self, which means that I need to be able to mutate the thing that I'm calling. And there are some rules around mutable things. So if I have just a ampersand vec, where I have a reference to a vec, I can hand that out to a lot of different places. That's totally fair. If I have a mutable reference, the aliasing rule is that I can only have one mutable reference to something, and I cannot have other references to something that I have a mutable alias to. So that way I don't have multiple things trying to mutate the same thing at the same time. I have to go through some other structures like a reference or a atomic reference counted or mutex to control my mutability. So that's some of that built-in safety that we have in Rust. So there. And then match is really a fun syntax sugar. So match would roughly be the same as if car is open parenthesis.
So match is a conditional.
Yes, match is a conditional.
If you're familiar with switch statements, it's sort of an upgraded switch statement.
Very much so, very much so. So the next thing we'll do is say, oh, well, if it's a closed parenthesis, well, what do I need to do in case of that? Well, that's a little bit more complicated, because if I have something in open parenthesis, so if, I have an open parenthesis on len, or no, I don't have an empty. Yeah, cool. So if it's empty, well, then really what I want to do is remember that this closed parenthesis is unmatched. So then I'm going to take my closed parenthesis and push it onto, push its index. Otherwise, well, now I have found a pair for that open parenthesis. So I want to take that open parenthesis and pop it off and remove it. And
does everybody follow that logic?
Yeah.
Any question?
Yeah, cool. So then the last thing we might write is an underscore to say, well, what if the character is anything else? It could be an open parenthesis, it could be closed parenthesis, it could be anything else. Well, actually, I don't care. I'm only looking at parentheses. So now that I have this, I know that open parenthesis is all of the open parentheses that don't have a closing parenthesis. And I know that closing parenthesis is all of the parentheses that don't have an open parenthesis. I need to start using the word parent because this is getting tiresome. So the next thing I want to do is construct a new string which doesn't have anything in any of the indices of the old string in these two. So the way I originally decided to do that was, well, lookup in vec is kind of slow. So I decided to make a hash map. So omit equals hash map new, and that's just my editor inserting the use statement there for me. And I'm then going to take omit and extend it with the contents of open parenthesis iter, because I don't care about open parenthesis anymore. So that's going to take, this is really cool to know, look at the type signature of the function you're calling. And I can tell, oh, because it's an ampersand self, I'm borrowing it. So I'm getting a bunch of references to integers in that. Well, actually, I want to consume it. So I'm going to call into iter. If we look at the type signature for that, that consumes self. So I'm going to take all of those integers I collected, or were any, and I'm going to put them into this hash map. And then, because I'm a little bit of an iterator nerd, I'm going to chain that with close parentheses. Yeah, so that's going to take one iterator and stick another iterator on the end of it. So it's going to smash the two together. And then finally, we're going to make that new string we were talking about. So the string is going to be, what did I call it there? That's S, this will be S2. I'm going to have this new string. I'm going to, again, I'm going to iterate over S. I'm going to take everything in S that I want and stick it into S2. So I'm going to take unless, so if index, well really if omit contains key, hash map, oh that should have been a hash set, sorry. Sets are cool, maps are too, but I wanted a set. Map needs a key, but set doesn't need a key. It's just here's a bag of stuff. And then hash sets are really cool because it's roughly O1 lookup time, so I'm not spending a lot of time looking up whether or not I've previously gone and found that index before. So in really large strings, this would be really important for the test cases I have here. Doesn't matter. So if I contain, and that should work right if I just say contain. So if I don't contain that, because remember, these are all the indices of unmatched parenthesis that I don't want in the new string. So if I don't, if this is not an unmatched parenthesis, I should have S2 dot, I forget what this ends up in push, it can push a character, so I'm going to push a character. Then I'm going to return S2. Oh, S3. That's the difference for this. All right, so we have that. Can't find K contains index. Yep. See, I'm being very brave right now. So I'm expected an ampersand U size. So okay, like you can take an index. That's fine. A little goopy. And so if we are correct, and I have successfully reproduced this from memory. It's hard. Yeah. We should get successful. So before we move on, is there any questions about this? Yes.
I noticed you're using. Okay, sorry. I'll wait. No worries. I noticed that you're using some test formats I haven't seen. What's this RS test in cases? That looks like I need to know that.
You don't absolutely need to know this if you don't care about it. This is from a crate called RS test, and it is adding a bunch of goodies to the existing Rust test infrastructure, which allows you to define fixtures and multiple cases for a single test. In this case, I only care about the multiple cases. So in this case, I'm saying, hey, this is a test. My first case is parenthesis, my second case is this, my third case is that, my fourth case is that. This allows me to write out the cases in a pretty concise way and then not have to repeat the same testing code in a lot of different tests. And you can see if we flip over to this, under the hood, it's a macro. It's expanding it into a whole bunch of different test functions. But I just don't want to write it by hand because I'm lazy.
Cool, thank you.
I love this way of writing tests, particularly because it allows me to write, particularly if you're dealing with a lot of mocks that have a bunch of crazy setup and you're mocking traits and you're doing all kinds of weird stuff. Writing that as few times as possible is really nice.
Well, it's easier to read, too.
Yeah, it's pretty easy to read. Like, even though you weren't familiar with this crate, I bet you probably read that. It's like, oh, I kind of can guess what it's doing. I don't like how it has me write case here. I understand that's probably so it can differentiate between case input and fixtures, but still makes me sad because I'm not using fixtures. Yes?
Can you try an additional case?
Yes, let's try an additional case.
Like close, open.
Let's see if it breaks. Close.
Other way around.
Close, open, like that?
Yeah.
And it should be empty, right? Yeah?
How about if we do that as well with some characters in there too?
Yeah, let's add some.
Oh, crap.
Yeah. That's kind of the fun of that case thing, because it made it really easy to add a new one. I didn't have to copy paste a bunch of code, or even a little code. Yeah.
So I really don't think it makes any difference, but it's just making me slightly nervous. I don't think it should matter. The way you're doing, can you scroll back up again where you're iterating through the string?
Yeah.
Yeah, so you're using cares enumerate, a little higher up. Yeah, there we go, line 37. That would make me happier, although again, I don't think it would matter if you were instead using care indices. Do you know that one?
I'm not familiar.
So what care indices does, so nowhere in here are you actually trying to index into the string using the numbers you're generating. So it shouldn't matter. But what care indices does is it deals with the fact that characters can be multi-byte.
Mm-hmm.
So it gives you pairs, like you're getting now, between the character and the byte index in the string at the start of that character.
Okay, so I think based on the signature of what it's saying here, it's basically doing the same thing as I was doing, but just better.
Better, yeah, it is. But the difference is, in that example there, it looks like those were all single byte characters. But if they weren't, the indices are not necessarily separated by one.
Yeah, as I understand it, cares will respect that as well, but I haven't put it through any violence.
So what happens is when you turn a UTF-8 string into an iterator in Rust, every, sorry everybody, start flame war here. Every char that comes out of it is actually a UTF-32.
Yeah, no, that's not my worry.
So because it's a UTF-32 coming out every time, the index is actually the byte position of the UTF-32.
Can you add an emoji in the test case?
So those two are equivalent. In other words,
No, they aren't.
okay.
I mean,
Oh, these lightning symbols?
so enumerate will always produce numbers that it'll always go 1, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, always separated by 1. Care indices will not necessarily be separated by 1. Because it gives you the byte index of the beginning of the character. So if they're single byte characters, then they will be the same. So if you're just doing this in ASCII, you can't tell the difference. But if they're multi-byte characters, then the indices returned by care indices will not be separated by 1.
Right.
And so it allows you to use them to index into the string to get that character back, which you're not doing here, so it doesn't matter. The only reason I even know this is because I was just doing a Rust exercise like yesterday where it mattered. But I just figured it was, we're nerds here, right? We nerd out about, Rust character strings.
This is why we wanted to do this.
So if you end up using car indices, does that mean you don't need any kind of specialized graphene iterator crates?
It does characters, not graphenes.
All right, so let's make sure everybody online can also follow this. The question was, if you're using char indices, does that also mean you don't need the graphene crates, because they're pretty impressive, but they're not small. And the answer was no. You're still dealing with characters, not graphene clusters.
Characters, which are not graphenes.
Correct. Okay. Thank you for that. That's really good. I'm going to think about that.
We shouldn't have started with character encoding.
If we're in the spirit of going after the details,
Oh yeah.
wouldn't retain be perfect here?
Retain, explain.
It's implemented for string as well, but I think it's every iterator. String retain is for every character you provide a function that evaluates whether character is kept or not. So I think you might be able to do, instead of creating another string, you might just be able to retain the one string.
Oh, okay.
Another thing is that since
Since
open parentheses and closed parentheses are created in order, they should be sorted, right? And so you could step through each of those while you step through the string to further retain, and then you don't have to use a hash map, because you wouldn't increment where you are in open and closed parentheses each time, but whenever you hit
a location that, or whenever you hit the index that is next in open parentheses or close parentheses, you could step forward and skip the item in the screen.
That makes sense to me.
But don't do it.
No, because then you can just keep this single right off the one team.
Okay, so it looks like Retain doesn't give me the index, and because I'm holding on to the indices, maybe it doesn't work the way we want. Because it looks like Retain is letting you decide based on the identity of the character, not its index. I was really excited.
I don't think that's the retain he was talking about.
Maybe?
That looks like a string retain if you wanted to iterate.
I was thinking of that one, but I think the iterator retain might do it. If you would do the s.char stuff retain.
Oh, yeah, it's a so the skin
That sometimes you play with the sugar and you end up learning that the diet was the best.
I think it might be possible doing a single pass.
Damn. You all got to know that it's not matched. That single pass is going to be checking the entire rest of the screen each time.
Do you have an idea of how to do it?
I have an idea. It's
Yeah?
not fully fleshed out. But you like start with the window on the both ends, and then you move forward until you find an open bracket, and then you move from the end until you find a closed bracket, and then you keep swapping one with the other until you're left with just like mismatched brackets in the middle, and then you can remove them.
That is
Yeah, I suppose that would work.
But would your test cases? Would your test?
Well, if you find one on the wrong end, if you find
Yeah, I
something
think
wrong in your window, you can just throw it out.
We think there's multiple right answers.
That's good.
No, I mean,
has many different answers.
No, on the
That's
test
absolutely
cases.
right.
On the test cases, there's more than one way to balance the parentheses.
Yes, there's another LeetCode related question which is classified as hard, which is please give every permutation of a correct balance by removing, and I have not attempted that. Yeah, so I think we've beaten that dead horse. That horse dead. So
Well done, everyone.
oh, when I broke it.
Imagine getting that in an interview.
What did I do?
As
What
long
did
as
I
they
do?
took us wrong answer, it's okay. As long as they didn't want you to retain them and find
Leave it in the
every
working state, so we can move on.
I don't think
So I guess
Rust in it.
No.
we could talk about quicksort, which looks kind of interesting in Rust. It uses array destruction, which is one of your favorites. We could talk about tries. I kind of gave away the cheese on that one. We could talk about comparing version numbers in a reduced set, not the crazy one I wrote for RPMs. We could talk about maze finding. All of these are kind of longer, so I don't know if I'll discount mazes. That one's kind of long. But we could talk about tries, or we could talk about version numbers. That could be fun.
Also talk about techniques you use for dealing with this when you're in an actual interview. Like the way you're talking now is how I talk when I'm doing this. You know, like you're talking to yourself out loud so that you can, but I don't know if you have other techniques.
Yeah, so to repeat your question for the folks on the radio, you could also talk about interview techniques where, you know, like I was talking through my thinking as I was doing it, which is, you know, I feel like a fairly common interview response, like, because they're trying to see how you think and maybe guide you towards things that are less destructive if you're kind of on the struggle bus, flailing around a bit. Happens to all of us. Ask me how I know.
Well, I can tell you, as somebody who does a lot of interviewing, I love it when I get that narration because I can understand how the person's thinking. But in reality, they're generally so nervous that they want to clam up, just get the right answer, and show off how smart they are. And if you were to ask them, they would know that, they would tell you that's not the way to do it. But in the moment, that happens more often than either I or the candidate would like. So what you just did was, I think, really important, and it is a skill to be able to both think and talk at the same time. If you don't practice it, I mean, at home, out loud, you're not going to be able to do it as well in the interview.
Yeah.
Or here.
Extra points for doing it in a room of 50.
I know, right? It occurred to me that this is possibly the dumbest thing I've done this week.
Or the smartest.
Yeah. Maybe.
What better prep?
Right.
Or did you have us do your homework?
I did lots of homework, thank you.
So are you finding Rust jobs to interview for?
Yes and no. Am I finding Rust jobs to interview for? I keep a lookout. I'm not very studious at remembering to look, so I usually am last in the door and they say thank you, but bye. They are there. They're fairly few and far between. I can tell you that my employer is currently not hiring anybody at all. In fact, we're shoving people out the door in masses that are kind of frightening. But they are out there. You'll see there's a few good places to look. There's a monthly jobs post on Reddit, which looks to be fairly high quality. I see a lot of European firms hiring there, but every now and again I see an American one, if you choose to stay on this continent. There's a monthly jobs report from a company called Filtra that shows up every now and again. I don't know how accurate they are because the past few months they've claimed that my employer has something like 170 Rust jobs open, and I can tell you none of those are open, period, at all. I see previous comments about layoffs.
I don't work for said company, but I can tell you how it works. No company wants to be on the record as not hiring. So if they have job recs and their job recs get closed, you simply don't communicate that they're closed. And so Filtra is going to show 170 open, but people on the inside are going to know that there's a hiring freeze. So there can be some dissonance, and it's not necessarily the outsider's fault. The companies are never wanting to look like they're closed because they always want to be open for the perfect candidate.
Yes, even if...
Brad, it seems an appropriate time to mention that I posted Oxide Computer link to the Discord. You can just say that. Look at this there.
It's better from the spiel.
So in our Discord commercial announcements, I posted the link to our careers page. We have 15 openings right now spread across engineering, sales, support, manufacturing, mechanical engineering, etc. I don't have the whole list in my mind, but it's there. We've got a very interesting interview process. Everyone wants to talk about it, and I'm happy to discuss it. Take a look.
All right, do we want to talk about careers anymore, or do we have time for version sorting? You probably have 5 minutes left, so maybe not, because you probably want to close it.
The good news is these wonderful folks are not as strict as the reactor was at Microsoft. So we can go right to 8 o'clock.
Okay. Well, why don't we talk about version numbers? Because I think that one would fit into, why did I write so much? That would fit into our time slot, to be respectful to everybody's time as well. I can talk through it. So this is a very cut down version of a version comparator. If you want to know how scary that can get, ask me about RPMs afterward. I've written like 4 of those, and they're painful every time. So given 2 version strings, everybody knows what a version string is? Ish. This is a cut down implementation. So a version string, like we've seen them, version 1.0. But then there's usually another dot and more numbers after that. What does that mean? So, as Brad alluded to, there's a thing called Semver, where there's a bunch of rules for how you compare these strings that are kind of numbers, but then sometimes letters show up and we get really scared. For this problem, we aren't talking about letters. We're only talking about numbers and dots. There are no hyphens, there are no carets, there are no @ symbols, like all of the scary things that haunt my dreams don't exist in this question, so we don't have to talk about them.
You really built on what
Yes. I was the guy who gave the dependency resolution talk, like, this is my special interest. So, so like probably the simplest one is it's just a number and there's no dots. 1 is less than 2. But then you add a dot, so in this example, version 1.2 and version 1.10, well, that's kind of interesting. Is 10 greater than 2, but if I'm comparing normal numbers, the 0 at the end doesn't mean anything in decimals, but this isn't normal, this is versions. So that's 1.2 versus 1.10, which kind of breaks your mind, and then you get used to reading it, and then you can't look at normal numbers the same anymore. So then you have, this one, which is version 1.01 and version 1.001, and apparently those are the same, because leading zeros don't mean anything, so we've just flipped the rules on you now. And then the other fun one, which is, well, what if there's lots of dots in the other one? Well, apparently those are the same. It's not true of RPM, but they've decided for this problem it is. And then, this is something I stole from LeetCode. They have a bunch of constraints on this, like, we're not going to do things that are greater than 500 characters in length. Neat, thanks. Version 1 and version 2 only contain digits and dot. It's actually pretty good to know. If the letters show up, we're back into RPM land and I get scared. Version 1 and version 2 are valid version numbers, so that's good to know. And all the given revisions in version 1 and version 2 can be stored in a 32-bit integer. So they aren't going to give us one 500-character long number. That would be a little mean. So yeah, cool. These are all good things to know. If I was in an interview section, in an interview, they probably would not have given me these constraints up front. I would be expected to think through it and say, well, how big is this string? How big are the numbers? Do I have to use a big integer, or can I use just 32-bit? You'd be expected to kind of parse through this yourself and figure it out. And so I've done kind of the same thing where I've used some things in here. I've used standard compare ordering. If you do this on LeetCode, they will not use the same things because apparently they don't speak Rust very well. I've sanitized this so it's a little bit more palatable. So if you write comparators in Rust for same reasons, you should probably go look at this ordering enumeration. It's really good. You have ordering greater, ordering less than, which is not featured here, and you have ordering equal. It's a little bit easier than trying to reason about integers, because some other language I've written comparators in, you return an integer and it's like, oh, it's negative, it means it goes that way, and then I'm like trying to remember the minus sign points toward the thing that's smaller, but sometimes it's not right and it gets really scary really fast. So Rust is actually really cool with that enumeration there. And then we can uncomment that, so we go back into mode of actually writing code. So if I were writing this, the first thing I want to do is split these things into their constituent pieces. So I want to take this version number and tokenize it into number pieces. Yeah? Yeah! So that, I don't remember why it is mutable, but I'll find out soon, right? And this is a little weird trick. Split. Oh, I need to split on something. That's easier.
You give child instead of spin. That's like
Please be patient. I'm from the 1900s. I bought this sticker for it. So yeah, we've split this, and now if we look at these, their type signatures is, oh, they're splits. What does that even mean? It means it's an iterator. We haven't consumed it into something else. So the next thing is, I know that from the the great conversation I had with the interviewer before I started writing code that everything inside of these splits is going to be a valid number. So I could take that iterator here and I can map it onto a new size from stir. So I'm going to take that gross string and turn it into a number, maybe. Because from stir, which apparently is, oh man, I need to import it. From stir, so I need to import the trait and sum of that. And then that will become actually something that's in scope. So, as we might have suspected, parsing integers can fail. See previous comments about letters making me scared. So this could have a parsing failure. And this is going to make Brad kind of sad because I'm told in the problem that this is never going to happen, so I'm just going to unwrap it.
For the record, unwrapping tests is just fine.
If this was production code, this would be so bad. This isn't a test code. This is outside of the test code. So if I was looking at this at work and doing this for reals, I would be, when I've done this previously, I had a lot more code about what to do when that is not an integer. In fact, I had code with, because I was dealing with letters as well, I had to sub-tokenize it into constituent pieces within there, and it got really scary really fast. But for the purposes of this particular exercise, we want to get into more interesting things, so we're going to unwrap here. If we wanted to come back to this and make it production ready, we would do something here. And this would probably have to turn into a result to communicate that, hey, you've broken expectation. So the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to loop. I've always found it really funny that Rust has a loop keyword. Like, I've done a bunch of Java and stuff, and just loop as a keyword just starts being kind of funny. So I'm doing it this way instead of using a more traditional for loop, because I want to know something from these iterators. I want to know when one of them is done. I want to know when one of them has exhausted, because that'll tell me about the ordering that these things have. So next I'm going to match, whoa, can't spell, on both left and the right. And this is something where, as I said, Rust's pattern matching and destructuring gets kind of silly and kind of a cheat code, because this turns into, I've written this in Python, it is disgusting. It is if and else statements that are nested and going all over the place, and getting code coverage on that was a total pain in the rear. It was horrible. So why am I returning 0? That should be, I'm not sure what happened in my reference implementation, but it's messed up. The next thing we're going to say is, well, we shouldn't be able to have two things that are none, because that would indicate that both of the strings were empty. I guess the two empty strings are
What would happen if they equal?
Yeah, so the next thing,
version 1, you're gonna, the second time around, you're gonna get none.
unwrap or 0, unwrap or is okay. I think that's Brad approved.
It's done, Brad. It's too late.
Sorry.
It's okay.
So,
if that's what it says on my tombstone, like the anti-unwrap guy, I won't be sad, so it's okay.
That'll be the one place where unwrap will be.
That's right. Unless it's from your car and we haven't unwrapped it.
Oh no.
Put it unwrapped in.
That would be my tombstone.
that would be a sad one to write. So I'm transposing this a little bit on the fly here, because in what I printed out, it returns an integer, which is so sad. So what I've done here is I have the case where both of them are none, which is, oh, okay, so that's ordering equal, because two empty strings are kind of equal. And then in the other case, I want to take the thing that's on my left, and if that's none, okay, put in a 0, that's the lowest arity that I can have in an integer. And the thing on the right, if that's a none, we'll put a 0, because that's the lowest arity, and then I'm just going to compare them. Yep. So that should not be a divergent function. So we talked about this a long time ago about divergent functions. I need to check to make sure that my function will actually return at some point, because I have that loop in there. And if I'm not careful, that loop will go on forever. So I have two things here, and I can kind of convince myself that these two will return. I'm pretty sure I don't need this match anymore, because this is returning straight compare. But we can check ourselves and find out that it doesn't work. That probably just means I'm not converting my -1s and ordering correctly. But I've done a bunch of talking. Are there any questions?
I can see why you're working with L and R as a tuple lower down, but I don't see why you're starting out that way. Because it seems like you ought to be able to squeeze 49 through 52 down to 2 lines rather than 4.
Yeah, what I think is happening here is, I can show you the paper after. The original solution, I'm having to lower this down to an integer because that's the way that LeetCode.com gave it to me, because they didn't know about std compare ordering. So I'm actually matching on that to map ordering greater, ordering less, ordering equal into an integer.
I'm just saying that, and so you ought to be able to, line 50 ought to be just letting you N1, line 52 letting you N2. You don't need the tuple.
There's probably a better way to express that, yeah.
That was all, just a minor nit.
Line 59, you only want to return if they're not equal, right?
Yes.
The comment was line 59, you only want to return if they're not equal.
Yep, that's my bug. I agree with you. So we're gonna pull that. Match on that. The loop again, yay. Should be pretty close to correct. Nope.
Don't you want to check whether one leg or the other went none?
Beg your pardon?
Don't you want to check if one side or the other went none and the other one's default? So a tuple of underscore none or none underscore? Or
Didn't you have 1.0 equals 1.0.0.0.0 though?
Yes, they have that case, which I don't agree with, but I come from a Red Hat background, so I'm just going to agree to disagree there. Yeah, I could beat on this a little bit more and we could get it working, but
I think from a time perspective,
yes, from a time perspective, if there are any other Rust questions and not about my inability to translate things.
Yeah. Last question.
Oh, I meant time. We have to wrap it up. So this will be last question.
Yes, this will be really good. Is a loop construct in Rust just a while one?
Yes.
Thanks.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I am so happy to see beginner talks because it can be super